So without further ado, I would like to start, and I would like to begin by introducing our first reader, Carol McMahon. Carol writes stories inspired by her experiences all over the world. She returned to the U.S. You have the full bio in the book, and as well in your program, you have a sort of edited version of the bio. She has returned to the U.S., where she has a son in Scotts Valley and granddaughters in Los Angeles. Please welcome Carol McMahon.
Thank you very much. I'll be reading from Who's Perfect. Getting the required doctor's approval for a personal trainer hovered on the horizon. Why did I procrastinate? Since my wonderful German general practitioner had retired and taken her eye contact and old-fashioned bedside manners with her, I'd experienced nothing in doctors' offices but baby-faced technicians. They stared at their digital devices during the allotted 15 minutes, typing in my answers to their questions. If a question from me deviated from their flowchart, they were silent or said, "That's not my specialty." There had been a few exceptions. One doctor, after glancing at the birth date in my records, when I said I'd had swollen ankles, asked what I expected at my age. A skin doctor had summoned his medical colleagues to scrutinize me while I stood naked and shivering in her examining room. We don't get to see something like this often. One young economically minded gynecologist had his examining table placed so that my private parts got the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows. Probing my insides on a sunny day, he looked through my spread legs and smiled to reassure me. So did the office workers in the building across the courtyard. But in addition, they waved. I concluded the reason I hesitated going to the doctor was because of the problems that I had getting health insurance. After the death of my husband, I was shocked to learn that I, his spouse, no longer was covered by our American health policy. I approached several German insurance companies, but as soon as they discovered my age, they hustled me out the door. They wouldn't return my calls. Consequently, I went to a doctor only for emergencies. A medical checkup for a private trainer couldn't justify the cost. Googling senior workouts, I happened upon a flamenco demonstration on YouTube. Flamenco seemed perfect for me. I ordered an instructional DVD and bought a ruffled flamenco skirt. Practicing the footwork, the skirt swishing, and the hand movements in the privacy of my apartment was exhilarating. My stamina increased, my posture improved, my arms started to have some definition, and my feet no longer felt like stiff boards. I became hooked on flamenco and forgot about doctors. Did I dare buy those flamenco shoes with the heels full of iron nails? The second time I practiced stamping with my new zapatos flamencos, the doorbell rang. I ignored it. The ringing persisted. With a red rose stuck in my gray hair, wearing my flamenco skirt and a tank top, I went to the door. It was the occupant of the apartment below mine. He took in my outfit. "Are you Spanish?" "No, I'm learning to dance flamenco." "That sounds interesting. Would you show me?" "Oh, I'm a beginner, not good enough to demonstrate." Somehow he got me to dance. He thought it was great. I found myself explaining how it all had begun, how I had tried to hire a personal trainer who didn't want to pay for a medical examination to get approval. But German health insurance would cover that. "I don't have German health insurance." "But you must have insurance in Germany." Rather than stating I knew that, I offered him a glass of wine. By the time we finished the bottle, he had promised to see if he could get me coverage. "Why is this so important to you?" He pointed to my front window. "See those lace curtains across the street? My mother lies behind them, bedridden. She can see into your apartment. views it as reality TV. She's a devoted fan, fascinated by your lifestyle.
Thank you, that was great. Okay, our next reader is Bonita Mugnani. She's a spiritual advisor and creator of ceremonies, celebrations, and rites of passage. Bonita is a performance artist with a passion for ritual theater and has performed original one-woman shows. Welcome, Bonita.
I'm now 83, and my to-do list isn't any shorter than when I turned 79 and proclaimed, "It's time to downsize." It's even longer. It seems like a tedious job. Unwelcome chore. Never-ending nonsense to go through everything I've collected and gathered over all of these years, to decide and determine what I'm going to keep to rekindle those fond memories, or let go of in generosity of spirit for others to appreciate and enjoy, and tenderly pack away in a treasure box for family and friends, not to be forgotten. It seems like a waste of precious time to lose and find myself over and over and over again in the past, when I'm still learning so much about myself and loved ones and life while living in the present. And isn't 8 the number of infinity? Aren't my 80s supposed to be about balancing and fine-tuning that which is finite and personal, while living into eternity, releasing my soul and enlightening my spirit toward the great illumination, getting ready for my death, transition, passing, departure, so I can truly experience once and for all the ultimate orgasm? I have more important things to do. What's this in this dusty container? Oh, it's the gold satin corset and white top hat I wore at Mardi Gras as Madame Mystic, dancing behind the jazz band with the French Quarter Madams when I was 77. Can't let go of this, or even other props and costume bits I'm finding as I dig deeper, even though I know a picture is worth 1,000 boxes. What's in this file?
Boxes.
Huh. All the essays, stories, and poems I've written since I was 14. Those are definitely keepers. How can I get rid of this collection of blank diaries and journals? What if I'm inspired to fill them? My life isn't even over yet. Well, at least I get a lot of explorative, existential thinking done as I sit here and sort. Enough is enough, though. I'm going to call some friends, go out into the twilight, listen to some live jazz, and dance my buns off. Time is of the essence.
Our next reader is Adele Shediak, and who is grateful for the vibrant community of which she became a part when moving to Santa Cruz in 1989. She is awed by the natural beauty of the area and inspired by writing retreats held in Big Sur and Yosemite Poetry Festival. My pleasure, Adele Shediak.
The perils. I have Netflix. The receptionist at the medical clinic pauses, ponders my answer to her question, "What is your supplemental insurance?" Friends, my tribe, stew over password dilemmas. The computer says, wrong. We decide we all need an 8-year-old for tech support. We thought we were doing okay. What will we be like at 90? Travel while you can, says Peg, as we sit in first class on the train to the top of Scotland. She's 90. We stop removing shoes and jackets at 75. The screener at Charles de Gaulle replies, "Good for you," when I inform her of my age. I then proceed to take off shoes and jacket and submit to a pat-down. Apparently, age doesn't matter in France. I meant to say, I have health net. And I'm happy and privileged to read a poem by Maud Meehan, who we all love. It's called At 80. This morning, I tuned out the news, unplugged the phone, opened the back door, inhaled delicious, fresh spring air, and wondered, who could ask for more? I couldn't help delighting in the pecky sound of birds out on the deck, plucking at mounds of lint I'd saved all year from my old dryer. I always set them out on the first sunny day, imagining nestlings cozy in fluff from fuzzies saved all year. Why, only yesterday I had fun finding Easter cards and baskets for my grand and great-grandchildren. Oh, and I treated myself to a CD by Santana that sent blood coursing madly through my varicosities. And furthermore, last night I had a dream. No nice old white-haired witty woman is supposed to have. What's more, I thoroughly enjoyed it. So though my wild and woolly days are past, don't for a moment think that you have heard the last from this old lady. And did I mention, by the way, that when I heel and throw away this cane, I have on layaway a big red Harley. Thank you.
Thanks, Adele. Our next reader is Fereshteh Fatemi. She had a 30-year career in interior design for international hotels and restaurants. In her poetry, she is consistently inspired by her love of Rumi and his philosophy. Welcome.
The poem that was chosen for this book was one that I wrote in answer to an invitation to a program or a collective of poetry in Hair in the Wind, which was done as a dedication to the courage of Iranian women and men in their dramatic struggle that began after murder of Mahsa Amini. So after all of those light and the funny poems and readings that you heard, this is a very somber one, but I wrote it in Farsi and then I wrote it in English. So I'm going to read the Farsi first just to have you hear what it sounds like. It's called Lion Woman's Mane. یال شیرزن. وزش یال بلند شیرزنان را میشنوی؟ روبرو شده با طوفان باورهای دروغین، با کمری شکسته در زیر بار زورگویی، دستانش بسته با زنجیرهای مذهب. هرچه وزنه فشار سنگین‌تر، او آماده تر. او برای آزادی حاضر به گردن باختن است، اما آرمان او از همه گلوله ها قوی تر است. با یال شیر آزادی بازی مکن. Do you hear the roar of the lion woman's mane blowing in the wind? Face to face with the storm of false beliefs, with a broken back under the weight of being bullied, her hands tied with the chain of religion. The heavier the pressure, the readier she is. For freedom, she is ready to lose her head. But her will is stronger than all the bullets. Do not play with the mane of the freedom lion. Thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful. You may wonder what this is. This is in case somebody goes over 4.5 minutes. I'll just keep it over there. 4.5. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Our next reader, it's my pleasure to introduce Julie Olsen Edwards, who is a member of the Child Development and Women's Studies faculties at Cabrillo College, a colleague for over 45 years. She's still a mom, now a widow, hanging in at 85. Julie.
Wow, an audience of peers. It is so wonderful to be surrounded by the age of this audience. Thank you. This piece is called Field Notes on keeping on in the mid-'80s. This body, this 85-year-old body, bringing memories of puberty, those years of not knowing what strange metamorphosis my body would shift into tomorrow, being embarrassed, completely awkward. And now, in the 80s, here's that experience again. A new list, but the same alien, visible shifting of my body beyond my control or choice. Thin skin, bruises, spots, discoloration, falling hair, disappearing lips, scantily there your eyelashes, thickening toes and thinning toenails, cracking nails, drooping neck, the fat that has moved from my breasts to my belly, the hair from my eyebrows to my chin. I'm aging, and death walks along with me. I find myself thinking about dying, the people I love, the funerals I attend, weighing my life. What have I done? What had I hoped for? Where had I failed? Worrying about getting ready, getting rid of the stuff that fills my house so that kids aren't drowning in the debris of my life. My lifetime of gathering stuff, it will be without meaning to those who have to clean up after me. Wanting to clear out those tangible artifacts of my life, and at the same time, wanting to hold them close. The brain is changing. Nouns disappear, leaving an itching in my brain. I know that name. I know that word. I can feel my brain straining, scanning, digging. It begins with an S. It's in that song. I know it, but I can't quite find it. But it's not just nouns. Remembering is unreliable. My memories, more than ever before, matter, and my memories keep morphing. Was I in San Francisco when that happened, or had we moved to Santa Cruz? How did we get through those exhausting, overworking, hard years? Did I really dance and sing the way it looks in the snapshots? How did my love and I manage to build again after we were torn apart? I'm 85, almost 86, and I'm appalled that I still get caught up in the expectations. Glad to hear about the 90-year-old who hiked the John Muir Trail all by herself. Glad to know that the first-time novelist is on the bestseller list at 82. Glad there are women who are older than I am, who look healthy, slim, dressed in comfortable clothes, and still manage to look classy and snazzy and say, I don't give a damn what I look like anymore. I am glad, proud to see them, proud to know them. But it feels like one more decade of expectation of the right way, the admirable way, the supposed to way of being a woman, of aging. And frankly, I'm tired. I don't want to climb any more mountains. I'm not driven anymore. I move slower. I think slower. I want less, unless we're talking about comfort food. It's time for some ease, some quiet, some moving inward. Not a time for reaching out. Not a time when I even recognize quite who I am. But I recognize the 80s are a decidedly different time of life. And I'm still here.
Thank you, Julie. Our next reader is Jan Harwood. She published 2 political mystery novels, Dangerous Women and An Unconventional Murder, at 80 and 82, after a long career as a psychiatric social worker and mother. She also writes lyrics for the Raging Grannies. Welcome, Jan.
Raging Grannies were the most fun I ever had, and I think that they all felt that way too. This is a short poem, then there's a longer one. They. When she became they, love soothed any shock, even tried the vocabulary, resulting in strange neologisms. When there was talk of injections, surgery, when the silvery voice deepened and dark hairs began to sprout, love admired the new tattoos on creamy skin, held out its arms, and held they tight. This was called The Last Time. I'm a seriously old woman, but I still get the urge sometimes, you know? And last night, the time seemed ripe. Lying in my bed, a completely sexless mystery beside me, cat sound asleep and no one else about, I decided to give it a shot. My fingers felt a bit rough on my dry and delicate clit, but I thought that might help, as determination, pressure, and friction have always worked fine in the past. I believe it was less than a year ago when I achieved a multiple of joyful pleasure time after time, savoring the multiple smiles on my age-withered face. But last night there was no joy, not even a damp premonition of delight, only some light, hopeful discomfort. And eventually the cat woke up, miffed by the persistent shaking of his peaceful bed. He jumped down with a soft growl like a disapproving maiden aunt. I guess it's okay, since I never thought I'd be here this long, and pleasures still come crowding in through my eyes and ears and palate. Through my memory constantly lavishes me with a symphony of love, losses, triumphs, and failures, good stories all. It's strange to be so abundantly alive in this time of chaos and suffering, when it's more clear every day that the center cannot hold. And last night I realized that as there has got to be a first time for everything, there must also be a last. It's very short, and it's in the front of my book, which I recently published. When I'm gone, you know I won't be, really. All the stuff I've accumulated. When I'm gone, you know, I won't be, really. All the stuff I've accumulated, cherished or hated, beloved others will have to deal with then. And when that's done for a few generations, there'll be memories, pictures, songs, and stories, tinged with my peculiar take, and remnants of many pies I stuck my finger in, whether it was wanted or not. Most of all, I expect, you'll find my powerful love. It's lodged in nooks and crannies all over the place, and you'll never entirely get rid of it.
Thank you, Jan. Our next reader is Sylvia Patience, who is a mother, a grandmother, a nurse, and a midwife. She has written 2 novels for children, and a third, The Double Crossing, is coming out this year from Paper Angel Press. I'd like to welcome Sylvia Patience.
Hello. I'm going to read 3 poems from the book. The first one is called This is the Time. The wind winds around corners of the house. Its sound brings rain, brings spring. Though in the quiet within the fire and hearth are still the center of my home. Early awake, I await in whispering darkness for the morning light to come. This is the time beyond the monthly bleeding, cycles of fertility, ability to bear another child. This is the time of weekly phone calls, long distance, of souvenirs and memories, this photograph, that shell, a silver ring. The time of learning how to live alone, to take long walks along the beach and solo hikes, to know again, become best friends with my own aging face within the mirror. However, I have lots of family living with me. I don't live alone now. Okay, this one is called Crone Staff. Gray owl feathers, downy soft for silent flight. Great bird of the night, of the darkness and dreamtime. Gray like the strands which run through my hair, symbol of the crone passage already made. Dry white bleached bones, spines outspread. The bird takes flight on the final crossing into darkness. Bird woman dancing, dance of life, dance of joy, intricate dance of relationship, of sameness and of difference. These symbols tied to the redwood staff, the crone staff, smoothed and oiled by loving hands, no longer young and soft, not yet stiff with age. Hands of the crone in her power, retaining her blood, gestating wisdom. Secret power of the crone, this passionate fire that still burns after being wives to men, having birthed and loved our children, transforming fire, destroying old patterns, dead wood on the forest floor, making way for new growth, living on his crone, gray owl woman. And this last poem is called, Is This How Death Will Find Me? Not a sudden, late intruder who breaks down the door at midnight, but a well-known, familiar face. Already, we have more than a casual acquaintance. When we met in high school, Jim, then later my friend Dwayne, both ran off with death. Since that time, we have become formally introduced on more than one occasion in professional capacities. Our work sometimes overlaps. At times, the visits were expected, even welcomed. Death has met my friend's parents, then visited my own. Just last week, Death took a job in the office where I worked. But this is new. I run into Death when least expected. Frequently, the name is mentioned, interrupting casual conversation. People my own age and younger go off without a word. Death has moved into my neighborhood, could even end up being my one remaining friend.
Sheila Carrillo is our next reader. Politically, her focus has been social justice, alternatives to police, compassion and care for our homeless neighbors, people and environment over profits, and justice for Palestine. Please welcome Sheila.
So I'm going to read approximately half of what I just found out is I could call an essay. No red diapers for me, a late in life encounter with socialism. The first time I recall hearing the term red diaper was in 1998, when an octogenarian friend told me about a soon-to-be published book that she was featured in, Red Diapers, Growing Up in the Communist Left. I was intrigued with the label Red Diaper Baby and in awe of her lifelong, unflinching struggle for peace and justice that included tear gas and a jail cell at the World Trade Organization protest in Seattle when she was well into her 90s. Recently, I was reintroduced to the topic through a community discussion of the book Red Letter Days by Sarah Jane Stafford, featuring 3 elder Jewish women educators and activists in my community. As a Jewish left-leaning political activist peer, I began wondering what had led me to socialism and radical activism, given that I'd been raised in a polar opposite social political framework. Yeah, I can't get it up. Is that better? I'm sorry. Do I get to start any of it over? Where am I? As a Jewish left-leaning political activist peer, I began wondering what had led me to socialism and radical activism, given that I had been raised in a polar opposite social political framework. My father was an unrelenting patriarch and a rabid anti-communist. So at 81, I find myself digging deeply through my family history and memoirs to uncover my political legacy, focusing on my father because, true to the times, my mother wasn't allowed much self-expression. Given my radically unred diaper upbringing, how had I come to be viewed of late as an elder leftist political activist and writer? At the time my parents met in a Jewish enclave in New York, they were both Democrats. But when in June of 1939, Roosevelt refused port of entry to the German ocean liner St. Louis with its 937 mostly Jewish passengers, forcing the ship to return to Europe, where more than a quarter of them died in the Holocaust, my father was justifiably enraged. As he pictured Jewish refugees being handed death sentences by the Roosevelt administration, with the claim that they might be spies and were a serious threat to our national security, my father grew bitter, and in his bitterness and bullheadedness, he became a lifelong, increasingly devoted Republican. My birth year, 1942, was a desperate and painful time for my parents and American Jews. Hitler was at the height of his power, and information was being widely circulated in the American press and confirmed by the US State Department that Nazi Germany planned to murder all the Jews. 3 years later, my parents picked up and left their beloved New York to come to be near my ill grandfather in California. They must have been brokenhearted and anxious about leaving their roots, families, and livelihood. What I remember of that first year in a trailer park in El Monte is crouching to draw circles in the hot, dusty earth, to play marbles with other black-eyed, swarthy kids like me. And I also have a disturbing memory of being called a dirty Mexican. Going through a stack of my dad's yellow legal pad papers, it dawned on me that a valued part of my life, my passion for justice, political engagement, and steadfast determination to right wrongs had a direct thread to him. His letters often mentioned the weight of anti-Semitism. To drum up his construction work, he'd spent much of his time in his early 20s, knocking on doors up and down Madison Avenue. That wasn't easy for a Jew in those days, he said. And among his news clippings, I learned he was referred to as a local hellraiser at the city council. My own hell-raising began in my 40s when I was hired as a bilingual aide in the school district where my brown-skinned children, whose dad was Mexican, had been schooled. In the course of my job in this rural mountain community in Santa Cruz County, I was shocked by the blatant racism I witnessed. Through their writing and our conversations, I learned about the pain and hurt my students endured. A Korean boy's eyes filled with tears as he showed me how kids pulled at the corners of their eyes to taunt him. And my brilliant Iranian high school student talked about kids shouting "camel" at him as he walked by. Never having discussed racism with my two children, I learned from my adult son how uncomfortable he had been when his soccer team would drive to the South County farming town of Watsonville for soccer matches, and he was subjected to snide racist remarks about the Mexican teams. Recalling my 4-year-old self in El Monte and the anti-Semitism my parents had faced, I was enraged and energized. To be continued.
Our next reader is Rosie King. Born in Saginaw, Michigan, her poetry has appeared in many journals and has had the honor of being read by Garrison Keillor on NPR's Writer's Almanac. She has many books out, especially with Hummingbird Press. Rosie King.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Wow. I'd like to start with
I can squeak in, I discovered in 4 minutes, or 4.5 especially, a poem by Tilly Washburn Shaw from her second book, Hanging Out in the Ordinary. And if you don't have copies, there are copies here. We have lots from Hummingbird Press. So I'm starting with Ratatata. I'm cheerfully making my way, springing into each step gladly, when feet sound behind. Approach. Quicken. Remember then how when younger, I always sailed ahead, for instance, with my boyfriend, not really meaning to, became his beacon light or bowsprit, face 4 feet in advance, caught up by my own beat, in love with the forefront. Today, still junketing along, while footsteps ever closer soon pass me by, the way they never used to. Find me left behind, still savoring my velocity, at a loss why I'm apparently walking faster, much slower now. I just wish Tilly were here to read it. Yeah, very close to, as close as I can get. Now I'd like to read the 2 poems. This is in Tilly, in the beautiful anthology, along with 3 other poems of Tilly's. The end, no, that's not the one I'm reading. Nothing Can Save Us. This is from my book, Time and Peonies, my second book, and there are copies here too. Nothing can save us. What then shall we do? Loving the sun, that yo-yo swirl of yellow we drew in our cornflower skies, counted on to flirt among the curly white clouds above the elms, to make fragrant even the dust we spun up from the cracks in the sidewalk. Sun that warmed us, freckled our skin, and that we learn only slowly, one day won't miss us a bit. Nothing can stop them, says my young nephew, pointing to the wrinkles on my outstretched arm. Not even being content. Thank you. Thanks. And the last one, what might happen? Ginger snap, coconut, slivered almonds stuck together with a glaze, surely sugar. Yet with tea, chamomile, so calming, who knows what tip of an insight might rise, unbidden, uncoaxed, unbound. A snow cap I'd get up and dress for, some meeting out there with a spruce on the road. Or a face with fresh eyes, yours maybe, and a voice to sweeten and steady me for the steep uphill. Thank you.
Our next reader is Laurie Korn. She is a radio producer and artist and writer, and she has published several memoirs. Welcome, Laurie.
I'm going to first read something from Margie Kern-Marshall, who is no longer with us. She was a dear friend. She was a teacher, a writer, a radio producer, political activist, world traveler, and mother and grandmother extraordinaire. She's in a book named Growing Old Disgracefully, so that'll tell you something about Margie. She was wild, she was wise, witty, and these are some excerpts from a radio piece that she read for KSQD, our local radio station. It's I guess I'm tall. I'm still tall. Thank you. This piece, which is a radio piece that Margie read on K-Squid, is called Flattery. When I left France, I brought back a Citroën 2 Chevaux. I named it Flattery because, like flattery, it didn't get me anywhere. Flattery's turn signals were actual metal arms that stretched out on command, kind of like that. Her canvas top rolled down manually like a sardine can being opened. She was easy to park. 2 people could lift her, one at the front bumper, one at the back, and drop her into any tight spot. It was the 60s. I festooned her with daisy stickers, peace symbols of the Vietnam anti-war movement. When she climbed steep hills, passengers had to walk alongside her because her acceleration was so slow. Cars behind me honking and yelling. But among Flattery's many admirers was my husband-to-be, Lee, a former race car driver. Flattery is how we met. Thank you, Margie, for your friendship and your gifts. This piece I wrote in memory of the 70s in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Many people back then were building homes, $500,000 homes, on land that was pretty cheap back then. In the meantime, living bare bones in shacks and trailers, and for my family, a half-built house on a hill with a view of the Redwood Mountains, but not much in the way of walls or ceilings. Overnight, we became hippies, a lot of us, still out there, right? Now, Judy Reynolds, who is sitting over there, my old friend Judy, was also building a house back then. She's the inspiration for this book, the original inspiration for this book we are celebrating. She said to me recently, "We weren't hippies, we were just poor." From a hippie to her mother. I love these sounds, tinking of a spoon against a cup, bleating of the goat down the hill, hum of the car coming home. I made a cake this afternoon. When I poured brown sugar for the frosting, a mob of ants scurried out in all directions, but they left me just enough, two-thirds cup. It is fly season again, but I have become more Buddhist on this hill, and when I see a fly drowning in some apple juice, I fish it out to drag its wings dry. Forgive me, Mom. We have learned to share our home with field mice in the shelves, scorpions in the garage, baby frogs on the kitchen sink, bees, bats, 10,000 flies, and ants in the sugar. But they have left me just enough, keeping the sugar loose as earthworms keep the garden. I could sit here for hours at the top of the hill, listening to the wind in the grasses, the laughter of men down below throwing horseshoes, gazing at the sculpture of stark white clouds against the deep blue, infinite sky. Thank you.
Our final reader this evening it's my pleasure to introduce Jill Ginghofer. Jill was born in southern England, as you will be able to hear when she reads, and she has lived in Santa Cruz, there's a typo, for 50 years, not 5. Before Santa Cruz, she lived all over and belonged everywhere. Jill Ginghofer.
down a bit. There. This is the most amazing crowd, and this has been the most amazing reading. I wrote both these poems after I was 85, determining my lifespan at 85. A 2 for the price of 1 sale, 2 huge bottles of Dove shampoo. Once home, I find I already have one in use, another waiting in storage. It takes me a year to get through 1 bottle. Now I'm going to have to live at least 3.5 years, which pleases me immensely. And I refuse to consider any of my heirs who might have benefited from 3.5 bottles of Dove shampoo. This is a little feisty. God is not my man. A fury of white hair, wisps of beard, girth hoisting side to side as he whirls, clutches air. Beneath his white robe, penis dormant, but balls hang and clang as he rages, cheeks bursting with nothing is right. The devil, on the other hand, perched on hoofs, spindly legs, minces toward me. He's interested. He responds. He couldn't give a shit. You can say anything. He muses on poetry, likes good movies, reads everything in a flash, makes careful suggestions. And he's so thin, his erection looks divine.
Hard to follow that. Oh my God. I'd like to end with a poem by a beloved local poet who passed recently, Bernice Rendrick. And I'd like to leave with this poem. Before we do that, though, I also would like to thank Matilda Rand from K-Squid, who has given us 2 wonderful interviews on the radio. Yeah. And those are accessible. You can find them on K-Squid. This is a poem called Rubbings by Bernice Rendrick. At first light, I rub the pale inside of my elbow in a small effort to continue the flow of blood that makes my life go on, though with a little less force downstream. The light is brighter in the slits of the blind, like eyes unbandaged, to see this room again, where I wake to the batik curtain and the black Rosa Gonzalez pot from Santa Fe my husband gave me one anniversary. Memory rubs the inner lip, illuminates its deep carving, which cuts a wound that breaks open, and I must relive the hospital's phone call at dawn of his death day. But this vessel heals even as it hurts, so squat and dark with its hard finish. Thank you.